Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Rise and Lead Women's Leadership Perspectives. I am your host, Cherie Wiley, and today I have with me a special guest, Miss Denisha Smith. As you remember from our last podcast, June is Mental Health Awareness Month. And I just wanted to continue this conversation because it is so very important. So many times as women, we feel like we have to put ourselves on the back burner in order to lead. But that simply is not the case because, as I said previously, and you'll hear me say it all the time, if we don't take out the time to take care of us, we cannot take care of others.
Mm.
And so as leaders, we're not just responsible for ourselves, we're responsible for everyone, and how we show up is definitely impacted by our mental health. And so we're just going to have a conversation because Denisha's background is in mental health, and she actually owns her own firm for mental health healing, therapy. And so I'll give her an opportunity to talk more about that. But I just wanted us to sit down and have this conversation because I think that it will really impact and help others. Denisha and I actually went to high school together, so we've known each other for quite a while. And it kind of leads back to at the time in high school, I'm sure we didn't know where we would end up because you just don't know, right? As 18-year-olds, we were out just trying to live our lives and chase our dreams. And so God saw fit to put us in places of leadership where we could positively impact other people. But it also goes back to the comment or the thought about community and who we surround ourselves with and who we're connected to. And I am proud to say that I've had the privilege of being connected to very strong, like-minded, ambitious women who, definitely have God in their lives and put God first, but also are very committed to doing things that actually make an impact that's bigger than them. And I think that this is a perfect place to kind of shift because Denisha, not only is she a business owner, she's a wife, she's a mother. And so she could be making her focus just about her family, but she's choosing to find that balance between family and also helping her community. So, Denisha, thank you so much for joining me. And I'll just give you an opportunity, if you would, to talk about that balance before we kind of get into the other pieces of mental health.
First of all, thank you so much for having me, Cherie. I'm super excited to share with your audience. Like she said, I'm Denisha Smith. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I own Healing Well Therapy, which is a holistic therapy practice, what I like to say. I'm here in Richmond, Virginia. Um, you were asking me more specifically about, you said, how did I get into it?
Yes, and the balance that you have developed with being a wife and a mother and running your
Girl,
practice.
I'm still figuring it out. I am still figuring it out. You see, I had a little mommy brain right there for a second too, right? So y'all have to bear with me. I'm 7 weeks postpartum with my second child. And we're constantly adjusting. I don't know if anybody ever strikes the perfect balance. It's what is working for me in this season. Sometimes it has to be adjusted, depends on the developmental stage of my 2-year-old daughter. We think we got a good balance, we think we're on a roll, and then things shift and we have to kind of adjust with that. And that's what I'm learning as a, well, I guess second time mom. But my daughter, she's 2. We've been sleeping through the night for a while. She was sleeping in her room and we didn't have any issues. Then this new baby comes and we're all a big happy family in the bed together. Oh my gosh. And so at first, it brought a lot of tension and for me, because I'm like, we don't want this. But I'm learning like that, in parenthood and in motherhood, and you have to kind of go with the flow and recognize that things shift all the time. And just because something is changing now doesn't mean that it'll always be like that. So that's what I'm learning as a mom, what I'm learning as a business owner, and what I have learned and continue to learn is the same thing, like going with how the seasons change. There are seasons where, you see more clients, And there are seasons when my nervous system can't manage that because of just what's happening at home. I have to be able to be present not only for a newborn baby, but for a toddler. I have to be present for my husband. I have to be present for myself. And so it always looks a bit different. There are seasons where I'm like, okay. And then other times I'm like, okay, this is giving part time. It's giving part time right now because this is all that I have the capacity for and being okay with it. So that's what I'm learning. Being okay with the different seasons that you're in life, and depending on where you are, things may shift, and being open to being okay with that.
That is
Lean-
so powerful. Absolutely. So, so very powerful. And I think that you made a good point that we all have to get to that place where that's not a sign of weakness when you acknowledge this is too much right now. I need to make a little bit of a shift. And everyone else is going to have to be okay with that because I think a lot of times we're more worried about what other people think and how they feel. You're not in this space. And I would rather take a step back and say, "Hey, I need a minute." Than for me to try to do more than I'm able to, and then I'm dropping a bunch of balls, right? Like I need everything to keep rolling. And that is maturity, is what that is. That's maturity in leadership and in life for you to be able to say, this is a little bit too much. Let's come back to this. And I
Yeah,
think that shows up in a lot of places where I've been in positions where people want you to take on the world, right? Because we are expected as women and leaders to be like superhuman, right? Like I'm not human. I can do it all. No, you can't. And you
yeah,
have to be okay and strong enough to tell someone, I've got this, and this on my plate. I'm not going to be able to do that. You need to find someone else to do that.
yeah,
Because, or let's revisit this when I have some time to take care of me. And so I think that is golden for so many women to hear that, to hear other women say that, women in leadership who are successful in that area, that it's okay, especially as business leaders, because I run into that as well. When you have clients, you may have a season where, everybody wants your help. Well, I can't help everybody. You
and
may
it's
there may
okay.
be a waiting list. I may have to get back to you. And people don't always understand that because they want what they want when they want it. But I can't be my best self for you if I'm taking on too much at one time. And then you're really gonna be upset when something that you needed done doesn't get done because I had to do these other things.
Exactly, exactly. And Cherie, I think sometimes we wear that as a badge of honor. Like, I got this many clients, I'm working with this person, that person. I remember having that mentality when I first went into practice. Like, we're doing good. People calling all the time, and I'm feeling like I need to take them on, and you get burnt out, right? And so then you can't help anyone. And so when we get into those spaces where we feel like we have to do it all or not wanting to let people down, and I feel like you can go a step further. And as you start your own healing process, right, going to therapy yourself, when you find that you're doing all these things or feel major urges to take on the world, typically there's something underneath that. Like, why do I feel like I have to take on the world? What is it like for me to set boundaries? What is it like for me to say no? There's so many other talented providers, so some of that comes with our history shows up. And it can be a trauma response when we feel like we have to do everything for everybody. So sometimes when we're finding ourselves kind of really struggling with that, or this continues to show up, that might be a great cue to start doing some of your own work to help you to move beyond that point.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that kind of goes on to, kind of our next topic of the stigma behind getting that support or the stigma behind seeking therapy. I know in a lot of different spaces, people just don't do that. And if we think about it as well, historically, that has a large tie back into, especially in the African American community, this idea that we don't get help, right? We don't get therapy. We don't go talk to, you don't tell people your business. What happens in the house stays in the house. And a lot of times that builds on, as you said, that trauma response comes up in other spaces, because when you're taught throughout your entire life that you cannot tell anyone what you're dealing with, you cannot process your emotions, you can't process those hidden hurts and that silent pain, then you carry that with you into spaces, and you show it comes out in ways, even though a lot of us think, oh no, I hide it so well, but you don't.
Mm,
When you encounter leaders who are hateful and nasty, and they're just like miserable all the time, and you're like, that comes from a place. I say it
mhm,
often, all behavior has meaning. And when I was, as a classroom as a teacher, that used to be something that always would come out. A lot of people, why are these kids acting this way? There's a reason why they show up that way. It may be, well, and a lot of times, oh, they just don't want to be here. There's a reason why you're seeing certain behaviors. And so that happens with adults as well, because again, that same trauma, if you're taught as a kid not to express that, you carry that with you. And
yeah,
so I think often I think about, how do we break down those walls to understand, for people to understand it's not wrong for you to go and seek help from someone who can maybe help you process things that you cannot process on your own. That doesn't make you weak. That doesn't mean that you're telling somebody your business. That just means that you are, again, mature enough to
mhm,
acknowledge that something here is not right. And there's someone that's been gifted to help me with those things, and
yeah,
I should be seeking that support, because when I start working on me, and you mentioned this before, when I start to heal and I start to get better, then everything around me will start to improve. And a lot
right,
of people don't understand the power of healing in itself, and how mental health is directly tied to that healing that's necessary for us to be whole people and to
right.
show up authentically in spaces that we enter.
And guess what? You're worthy of support. You're worthy of help. Some of that, is tied into how we feel about ourselves and what we've seen. Did we see our parents reach out for help or support? A lot of times in our community, we didn't. We saw our mothers taking on a lot. We saw our fathers taking on a lot, and so that gets passed down generationally. And so
Mhm.
then we feel like we've got to shoulder all these things without help. And so there is so much that can come up from just having someone not trying to fix you. Because I tell my clients, if I could fix you, honey, I'd be rich. I can't tell you what to do, but just having someone there that is authentically there to just support you. And people just kind of break because it's like, ooh, I've been carrying this for so long and nobody has, I haven't allowed anyone the opportunity. So I'm grateful when people um allow me into that sacred space to be able to show up for them in a supportive way, because it's hard for us to do. Understand the generational context. We don't talk about what's going on in our home. And even when we talk about those things that have been said, like you don't share what goes on, all of that stuff has historical context.
Mhm.
And it was necessary to keep us safe back then, right? For generations to keep us safe, but then it becomes maladaptive after years. It's like, okay, where did this come from? And maybe it was
Mhm.
to help me then, but now it's hurting me. It's no longer helpful. It's not serving me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that that is important for us to just acknowledge that the ways that things were done in the past have not always been very helpful and supportive to us in the present. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and you cannot heal from things that you are not willing to talk about. And so understanding that part and how it impacts all of us each and every day, because we can go down so many different avenues to where that way of thinking doesn't serve anyone.
Right.
But I think that when we just focus on the mental health side, it plays out the same way. We have to talk about it. And a
Yeah.
lot of those again, I talk about that silent pain is generational, and it can be so many things. And so I was having a conversation with someone else, and it was more of a conversation about marriage, but they were talking about the way that trauma all of us in some way have been traumatized by something from
Yeah.
childhood up, and how that trauma impacts our relationships. And in that this conversation that we're talking about, as with husbands and wives, when they first come together, they have to overcome that trauma in order to come together as a
Yeah.
couple. And so I think the same thing happens when we're building relationships in other spaces. When we bring that trauma in those spaces with us and we're too afraid to talk about it, or we're in that mindset that we can't, then that prevents us from connecting with people. It prevents us from making decisions that best serve everyone,
Yeah.
because we're battling our own issues.
Hmm.
Even with leadership in itself as women, right, we're traumatized a lot of times because of the interactions we've had with men in
Right.
other spaces, and the way that our our leadership has been challenged. And so we have to make constant choices about how we show up in those spaces. Do I show up as the jerk because I now need to prove myself that I deserve to be
Right.
here and I'm going to act the same way that I've seen others act? Or do I show up as the type of nurturing leader that is really needed in this space because I make a choice to do something different?
Mm.
And that is at play constantly in these type of spaces. And so just I thank you for, acknowledging that as well, because
Hmm.
we have to get to a place where we're getting past those barriers. And they're barriers that we set for ourselves. And
Yeah,
it
but I'll
does come
go a
from a
step
place of fear.
further. It
Yes.
does come from a place of fear. And so when
Yes.
it comes from a place of fear, it comes from a place of not feeling safe.
Hmm.
Because I'm sorry, when you was talking, I'm like, yeah, because
Yeah.
we don't feel safe in those spaces and our bodies are trying to protect us, right? So when
Yes.
my body feels like it's threatened, what do? We go into fight, flight, or freeze response. So a lot of times as women or just as individuals, when we go into these spaces where we have been challenged, where we have been undermined, where we have not been seen, there's parts of us that show up that feel like, okay, I'm ready for you. And that's not even our personality, but it's our bodies, literally our nervous system trying to protect us. It becomes triggered. So why is it every time I get into this meeting, I'm showing up like this? That ain't even me. It's
Hmm.
your body trying to protect you, and it goes into that fight, that fight response. So it all goes back. It's all in our bodies and it shows up.
Yes. And so going to that, how would you suggest or think that people, especially people in leadership who are responsible for creating these spaces, can create safe spaces of acceptance for those that they lead and, even for themselves?
Let's talk about it, first of all. So, naming things that show up, that could show up, or creating a culture where, you know, that we're not, what do you call, like hoarding our PTO,
Mhm.
right? And using that as a badge of honor, like, but talking about like why it's important to take time for yourself. What are some signs of burnout and what does the burnout cycle look like? I think we should have those conversations, not being afraid to pull our team in or have individuals with our team, people on our team, and if we're seeing things that may be some red flags, like I think it's creating that culture where we talk about it and we're not afraid to address it. And matter of fact, we encourage it and we praise people for taking the time for themselves. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. And when we talk about talking about it, understanding and creating an environment where people really know that even if they do talk about it, it's not going to be used against them, right? Like
Oh,
it's not going to be my business is spread around, or whatever the case may be. And as I we had kind of talked about this before, there was an incident that has stuck with me for years. A few years ago, there was an employee that worked in a school division in Virginia, and she was having some mental health things going on. Well, it got out that she was dealing with these things, and she was made to feel as though this was problematic and something was wrong with her, and all of these things, and she ended up taking her own life. And so, understanding the importance of that's another area of safety. Yes, we can talk about it, but what are we going to do with that information? And can I
right.
trust my team and those around me to say, whatever you share with us, whatever, whatever you're dealing with, we're not going to use that against you. We're not going to make you feel like you're damaged in some way because you say, I have this thing going on and I need to
Right.
address it. I need your support in this area. And I think that that's a perfect example of how fragile that balance can be, because if I'm already dealing with that weight and then I trust you to for you to know it, and then
Right.
you use it to hurt me even more, that balance is so very fragile.
And you've created more trauma, right?
Yes.
So now it took a level of safety to be able to express that I had a need, that I needed support, and then you use that and you weaponized it,
Mhm.
right? So that's horrible. And I'm so sorry that that happened to that individual. That should never have happened.
Yes. And unfortunately we're seeing it more often, even with the situation that happened higher education just a few months ago, because of that lady's lifestyle. She was made to feel as though she was not in a place of safety, and she was harassed, and she also took her life. And
Mm,
so just understanding, like, it can become that serious. These are
it
extreme
is.
cases, but it
Mm-hmm.
really is, because when you're battling that particular battle, and I could say that, a lot of times on here I do share personal things. When I was dealing with, I came out of a previous marriage, and the situations were, it was a terrible situation. And so when I was shifting into finding myself again, I struggled with depression, and it was bad. It was to the point where, there were days I could not get out of the bed.
Yeah.
My mom had to help take care of my son. Like, it was really, really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think about that place that I was in, I didn't feel comfortable telling people outside of my immediate family.
Yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't even all my family, because some people in my family like to share information that you don't want
Mm-hmm.
shared. But my mom knew, and she prayed me through that. But
Yeah.
it wasn't like I felt comfortable going to people or having a community. At that time, I was isolated, and we know that that's a lot of times the breeding ground for depression,
That's right.
especially to really kind of swell up, is when you're in that isolation. I couldn't face anybody because I felt like a failure. I felt like,
Yeah.
the way that things had happened were my faults. And
Right.
so I wasn't able to show up the way that I would normally have shown up, and I needed to be allowed that place of healing. Thankfully, I had support, but it wasn't like an entire community, because I didn't
Right.
want to tell anybody, because I was embarrassed. I was
Right.
embarrassed to share all the things that I had gone through in that experience. And so I do think that that happens a lot of times. We have women who come to work. They're going through a divorce, they're going through separation, they may have had a miscarriage. I know I was talking to a lady who, she was having health issues and was forced to have a hysterectomy, and she could not talk about it. She couldn't tell anybody, I feel this way, I'm hurting. She was said she was go into the bathroom and cry on her
Mm.
lunch breaks, and then get herself together, redo her makeup, and act like nothing had ever happened. And I was like, I mean, for one, that's not healthy. And number two, like, where were your people? And she said, I was in an environment where I could not tell anybody, because then I would have been looked down upon. Why are you
You
not
deal
able
with
to
so
just deal with
much.
this? Right.
Mm.
And so, the importance of just, we've got to deal with it. And you've said that so many times. If you don't address the thing, it doesn't go away. It's not like it
No.
just disappears. You have to get the help that you need in order for you to get back to the place where
Yeah.
you're, just able to stand on your own 2 feet and say, I can move forward, I can go. And acknowledging that when you're in this healing process, and I think it's also something that people don't talk about, you can have days where you are way ahead, and you have days where it's like, how am I here again?
How? Exactly. If you feel it, I like to tell my clients, if you feel it, you can heal it. And so what that means is whatever we're dealing with, we've got to be in it for a bit.
Mhm.
And that's how our bodies kind of processes the overwhelm and stress. But a lot of times what we do is in this automatic responses, we kind of numb out. It's our body's way of protecting us, or where we just don't want to deal with it, or we busy ourselves. And so we have to kind of take time, and that's not sitting and wallowing, it's giving myself space to feel what feel my feels pretty much. Yeah. A lot of times we go through things as women and then we jump right back into it. It reminds me of the first miscarriage I had, which I had several. First miscarriage I had, it might have had it on a Wednesday and had to be back to work on Monday.
Mhm.
Just feeling raw, feeling open, feeling exposed because people knew that I was pregnant. And and that goes back to creating an environment, working, being mindful of the culture of the places that we're working. You know what I'm saying? Do I want to be at a
Absolutely.
place where if something happens with me, productivity is more important than me as a person?
Hmm. Absolutely. And we
So,
have to take out the time to think about that. And I do think, a lot of times that's a difficult decision to make. And I've been in places where, I talked about this on the last podcast, where the toxicity just made it where my body, as you talked about, physically responded to showing up there. I would get physically ill,
oh,
like in the parking lot because it just this is not the place I want to be in. And I
mm-mm,
finally had to make a decision to remove myself from that space. And so, even in that takes and that takes trust because again, mentioned before I rely on God and whoever, everyone
as
has
do
their
I.
own, but
Hmm.
that's where I go. And the trust that, even if I make this move, God got me. I would much rather be in a place where I am at peace. I'm excited to be here. My joy, because anyone knows me knows I'm energetic when I'm passionate about something.
Right,
And so I want my passion to be able to come with me in all
right,
spaces that I enter.
mhm,
If I feel like I'm being suppressed in some way, then this is not the space for me
right.
because people who really value you, they're going to pull out those gifts, right? The best of you is going to be able to show up in those spaces. And it's not enough money in the world for me to forfeit my peace.
Mm-mm.
And I used to be okay with that. Like, well, I got this opportunity. They're offering me this much money. But now it's like,
Hmm.
I'll get that back. Like I'll recoup that however it happens. But I'm not gonna forfeit my peace in order for you to feel more comfortable. And your comfort is in diminishing the gift that I bring
That's
every
right.
single day.
And we know ultimately we don't serve a God that, as as Christian women, I don't believe that we serve a God that will allow us to, that will want us, desire us to be in a position to where we're being suppressed and we're feeling heavy and we're feeling weighted in situations. So we do have to kind of tap into the trust because a lot of times we don't know what's on the other side. So it's like,
Yeah.
but when we're able to kind of walk and trust and believe, it's always better. I've never had an opportunity time where I've been left out there.
Hmm.
And so, we have to bet on it. And I think that can be so helpful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. One that we need to have more often because it is food to the soul for
For
us to just
sure.
be able to sit down and really talk about things that matter. I want to give you an opportunity to share with the audience all the things that you have going on and ways that they can reach out to you.
Okay, awesome. This has been a great conversation. I'm so glad to be here and to share in this way. But you can, if you need any support and you live in Virginia, I would love for you to reach out. My practice is Healing Well Therapy. You can check us out online at healingwelltherapy.com. I'm also licensed in Maryland, where I have a Maryland-based practice. It's called Embodied Culture. You can check me out on Embodied, Embodied dash culture.com. Check me out on Instagram, embodied dot culture as well. And if I can't support you, I would definitely love to direct you in someone that may be able to.
Thank you so much. And as Denisha mentioned, she did just give birth to a beautiful baby. And so she is still taking some time to heal. So reach out to her in August because she is still on leave, and we want her to have the time to be able to heal fully and to get back into the swing of things before she jumps back into new clients. Again, thank you all so much for listening. We are here every second and fourth Thursday. And so you will continue to hear more from us, more great things coming up. But we just hope to see you next time. Thank you.